Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Diane Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is August 14th, 2024, and I am so glad that I'm actually being able to bring you today's podcast. You would not believe the technical issues that I've been dealing with. Normally, whenever I do these podcasts, I get 3 audio tracks from our interview. I get one that is me and my guest blended together, and then I get each of our voices on separate tracks as well. So it's really nice. I can go through, and if we speak over each other, I can pull them apart and give you 2 clear tracks so that you can hear each of us talking. But I always have to take the tracks that I get from our Zoom interviews and convert them into WAV format. And then I can pull it into my editing program to put it all together to broadcast. Well, for some reason this week, even though the original track of the 2 of us together was all there, it was the 45 minutes of the original interview, everything was there, but whenever it would convert to the WAV format, only 4 minutes of the 45-minute interview would transfer into my editing program. Now, for some reason, our individual tracks were fine. Thank goodness. The broadcast gods were on my side for that one. So I was able to manually blend these together to rebuild our entire interview. So it is getting out a little bit later than normal today, and that is why, but at least we have the interview and it is all there. And you are going to love it, because if you like really good women's fiction story that has a little bit of magical realism, a little bit of paranormal, a lot of history, and actually has some information that is based on real historical people, you're going to love this book. And I mean, basically, if you just like a well-written story, this is something you definitely want to check out. But enough of this. Let's just get right to the interview while I go fix myself another iced tea and just chill out for a little bit. Please welcome to Book Banter with Diane Burkhart, a fantastic guest, Heidi McIntyre. I don't do a lot of intro. I do that later, but you are going to get a little bit of a one because I was just so shocked when I was reading your bio on your website, because you and I have so much in common. First of all, we both got married late in life.
Late bloomer.
We both did marketing and publicity before becoming an author.
Yep.
The one thing that is very different, though, my writing coach in my creative writing class in university did not encourage me to be a writer. It was exactly the opposite. I like surprise endings and cliffhangers. And he was always telling me, people hate that. People don't like surprises. People hate cliffhangers. Do not become a writer.
Oh my God.
And you had a much different experience.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I did. Because that's really what started the whole process for me. It just caused me to really think about what I wanted to do. And at that time, I had been a communications major and I was writing Pop-Tart commercials.
Yeah.
But this was huge for me because it opened a whole new door and it made me realize, I think I'd like to write a book one day.
So now I kind of did this a little bit backwards. Let's go ahead and have you tell our audience who you are and what you do.
Great. I'm Heidi McIntyre. I'm an author and a book marketing coach. My debut novel, Sea Magic, came out in February 2023, and I'm currently writing the second book in the Hidden Gem series. So I'm super excited about that. It's a paranormal women's fiction novel, and that's what the series is based on. And it has both magical realism and paranormal fiction, which is the two seem to go well together for me as a writer.
Since we did kind of put this together at the last minute, I did not get much of a chance to get really into your book. I'm only about 5 chapters in.
Oh, that's a lot for the last minute.
Oh my God. I couldn't stop reading. I am just absolutely fascinated by this story. I love your descriptions. It's really easy to picture everything going around this character and understanding where she's coming from. You have a wonderful descriptive easy read style that is just entertaining and relaxing, and it's so easy to just slip into the story.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for telling me that. I've heard a lot of that too from readers who have emailed me or have sent me messages through my website. And it's just so wonderful to hear that. And I have had several people give on the reviews tell me that they couldn't put it down. They were up all night reading it. And that's really, as an author, that's really what you want to hear.
Well, and my husband just left on a business trip, so I'm sitting here thinking, I don't have to make dinner. I can just grab the book, go order some takeout, and sit down and read tonight.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's one of those things. It's like, I hate when he has to go on business trips, but whenever I have something like this book to keep me entertained, I'm like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, sweetie.
That is fabulous. I'm like that with a book. I love it when I start a book and I can't put it down. It's just
Hmm.
getting into the story and into the characters for me is like heaven. And I've always been an avid reader my whole life. And I just enjoy that part of reading where you don't want to go to sleep. You want to keep reading the next chapter.
Oh, definitely. Now, since you had such a good career going in marketing,
I
what was
know.
it that actually prompted you to become a writer?
But it's kind of interesting because I had been in produce marketing. I worked in the fresh produce industry. So I worked with growers and shippers and commodity boards and associations. And I had been on my own as a consultant in the industry for about 11 years.
Oh,
And I
wow.
really loved marketing, but I really loved working with the growers and going on tours of their farms and seeing
Mhm.
how they grew their products. And it was a wonderful experience. But the whole time, towards the end especially, I kept thinking there's something missing. And I couldn't figure out what it was for me, but there was just something missing in my career. And I did some reflection, I thought about it, and I remember even telling other people I meant to do something else with my career at some point. But when that happens, I'll use my marketing to help me, whatever it is, whether I create a widget or whether I start a new service or launch a new product. I know that my marketing will assist me. And that gave me reassurance. But at that point, 11 years in, when I was just so confused about why I knew that something was missing and I just couldn't figure it out, I decided to partner with another consultant. And I thought maybe I was missing being a part of a team. And her and I worked together for about a year and we brought in even larger clients. So we decided to start our own agency. And I was so excited about that. I thought, this is great. This is the thing that was missing. I just wanted to be a part of a team and not just an independent consultant on my own. And the first year was fantastic. We did great. We started hiring. We brought in some additional new clients. All these things were going well. And that feeling came up again, like, oh my God, why do I feel like something's missing? And it really bothered me for a while. I remember very clearly I was at a trade show for the Southeast Produce Council, and I was up all night in my hotel room just debating on what is it? Why do I feel like there's something I'm meant to be doing and I'm not doing it? And then I think it was maybe in the early morning hours, it occurred to me, like maybe I should just write a book. And that was a weird feeling because it went from one extreme to the other. And I had just started this agency and I thought, wow, okay, so I'll just do this on the side. I'll write a book and see how I feel. And maybe that's the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And I'll never forget the first time when I went to the library to do some research. And this was not the book that was my debut novel. I was writing historical romance and I'd never published that novel. But I remember when I was going to the library to do some research, I was so excited. I was like, I had all these books out. I was looking at the history of the 18th century, which was the focus of that book. And it was like I was renewed. There was something within me that it was just like, wow, this is great. This is so cool that I'm doing this. And when I started writing, especially the first couple chapters, I felt so relaxed. And it was as if like this creative well inside of me opened up that I didn't know that I had, or I had it in college when I decided I wanted to write a book one day. And I had forgotten that creative side of me. I had become all business, and yet I hadn't tapped into this creative well. And I remember even feeling a little bit brittle as an executive, as if like irritable, I guess is maybe another good word for it. And when I began writing, it was like those sides of me smoothed out again. And I felt completely renewed. And it was such a great experience that I thought, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me 12 years before I launched my first book. So there was a period of time where I had to wrestle with, what do I do? I'm in this great career. I have this agency, and yet there's a part of me that wants to be a writer. So those two had to battle it with each other for a long time before I made the final move. And in 2020, I left my job at the agency and turned it over to my business partner. And then I began to work with, I had one part-time client that I continued to work with for about a year and a half. And even then I knew I had to let go of that. So it was really scary to go from this thriving career to a whole new life change. And that's what I did.
That does take a lot of self-confidence in your own abilities to make such a huge leap.
It was like flying without a net.
Yeah.
You know, that feeling of, oh my God, what if I get into this and I don't like it? And that was the scariest part. And it took me a long time to wrestle with that. But my husband was the one who really encouraged me because I kept moving the goalpost.
Mm-hmm.
I kept saying, okay, I'm going to do it in 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. And he looked at me one day and he said, and I was traveling a lot. And at that time I was having some physical problems, some health issues. And he looked at me and he said, this job is killing you.
Mm-hmm.
You need to make it a year. I'll completely support you, but leave within a year and you need to start over because where you're at now is now impacting your health.
How much do you think your husband's support really had to do with you making this life change?
It was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge. And I kind of knew that internally, but I was afraid. And I am a very independent person.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea about being dependent on somebody else, even though I love my husband, was a little freaky for me.
Yeah.
And so I had to sort of get over myself and say, if this is what I'm meant to be doing, this is the time of my life to do it. And if he can support me, it should be a no-brainer.
Yeah, my husband and I have those conversations a lot. I would not be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for him.
Yes.
So I can completely understand that. And I struggle with that myself because I am so used to doing everything for myself. And part of that, I think, comes from the fact that I was single for so long. I know I got married when I was 48
Ah,
to now actually relying on somebody so I can make a huge career change. That's terrifying.
that's exactly what it was. I was 44, and that's exactly how I felt when I got married. And that was around that time that I started writing at that age, too. So it was just a huge time of transition for those 10 years or so. So, yeah, I totally understand that.
Now, one of the things that most, especially indie authors who don't have any help at all, but even some traditionally published authors who have minimal help, marketing is like the bane of their existence.
I know.
They have no idea how to launch a book. They have no idea how to promote or where to go. And even those who do know where to go, they don't have media kits. They don't know how to do a one sheet or a press release.
Exactly.
How has it been for you coming from a place of marketing and being in this industry now?
Actually, for me, it was great because that was something I knew about. That was a strength that I had. And I had a lot of knowledge in that area. And so but my issue was sort of the opposite. I wanted to focus too much on the marketing and I had to continue writing.
Mm-hmm.
I became so enamored with all the things I could do with the marketing that it was hard for me to create a balance between the writing and the marketing, especially when I launched my first book. I think for the first 4 months, I didn't do anything but marketing. And I realized I still have to write.
Uh-huh.
And so there's like this sort of division. I call it the executive who does all the marketing inside of me and the creative who says, I just want to hang out and write. And so I had to sort of figure out a schedule between those two. So I realized I used to like split up my day half writing and half marketing, and it was too much of a push-pull.
Yeah.
So I do like a full day of writing, the next day a full day of marketing, the next day a full day of writing. And those two sides seem to be working together well in that situation.
I'm over here laughing because it's like, I understand. I get so caught up in the marketing sometime that I forget about writing. And then I get so caught up in the writing that I forget about doing marketing.
Yes.
It's really crazy how lost you can get in each one.
Yeah, exactly. And a year before I launched my book, I started in indie authors, women's fiction indie author support group. And that really helped too, because we were all debut authors pretty much. I think there was only one person that had launched a book a few months before. And she kind of guided us too in all the steps as an indie author in publishing a book, because not just the marketing, but there's all the things you need to know about publishing, which is very complicated. And so that was great because we brought in tons of guest speakers to speak to us. We meet on Zoom every other week. And that really helped because we were able to also bring in experts to help train us on things like categories and keywords and how to write a killer book blurb and all these things that go into that were really helpful. And then I began to coach some of the authors on the side who were struggling with their marketing. And that's kind of how I transitioned to, wow, I could become a book marketing coach because I really missed working with clients. That's the one thing I loved about my marketing business was I loved those deep relationships I had with my clients. And as a writer, it's very isolating. So as a coach, I can still have that, but I help them figure out how they should do their marketing versus me doing it for them. And that's a win-win for both of us.
Oh, yeah. And there's such a need for that. I'm always surprised when I ask for people to please give me some photos. And most people, it's like, I don't have a good, clear photo of me. Not one.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if you're going to be doing publicity for your book, you need to have a media package. You do.
Yes, that's critical. That's very, very critical. And I have a lot of authors too who are afraid to go on podcasts. They're afraid to put themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's also something that I kind of work with them on too, to get them to overcome those fears and realize it's a conversation. It doesn't have to be intimidating.
And I think that's one reason why a lot of indie authors are coming on my podcast, because I will walk them through it. And I try and do everything to make it a calm, relaxing, enjoyable experience.
Yes. And that's great. I was so impressed by the stuff that you sent me and the examples you had on your website on how to do these things. That's just a win-win for people.
Well, and I remember what it was like whenever I first had to do my first book launch and how I knew nothing about what I was doing. It was all just hit and miss. And that was the reason why I published my first book under a pen name.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, I have like 7 books that are all underneath a pen name. And that was because if they were absolute total garbage, no one would ever know they were mine.
That's the biggest fear with launching a book. Like, oh my God, will people like it? What if they hate it? It's really like you feel naked almost.
Yeah.
It's so personal.
Yes. I always tell people, though, that was my practice series because I was just figuring out how to do all of this stuff.
And that's how I felt about the book, my first book, that historical romance novel. It was the book I cut my teeth on. I practiced with it. And it took about 5 years, like 3 years, 2.5 years to write, and then about 2.5 years to do the editing process. But I knew that it wasn't who I wanted to be as an author. Because even my editor said, why are you including all these other relationships in your book? You have a chapter on her grandmother. You're talking about the relationship she has with her family members. She said it's a romance. It's about him and her. And so I had to cut a lot of that out. And then when I was done, I realized, oh, this is not me. That's why I was leaning more towards women's fiction, because I want to talk about my characters' relationships. I want to look at the whole family picture and tie that into the book. Like with Sea Magic, there's a lot about her relationship with her mom who passed away, and then her relationship with her aunt who works in her store, in addition to her love interest. And this felt more real to me. It felt more like who I was as an author.
So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your book?
Okay. Sea Magic is about a woman, Madeline is her name. She lives on the coast of New England and she owns an antique store. And she has this special ability where she can touch an object and feel the essence of the previous owner of that object that comes into her store. And she's always been psychic ever since she was a kid, but she learned to tamp that part of her down because the kids made fun of her and her mom didn't approve of that. Her mom was a Christian woman who didn't believe in psychic abilities. And she went to a estate sale with her aunt who works in her store. And she found a box in the dark corner of a bookshelf and she pulls it out and inside are old coins and a ring. So she decides to buy the box. She gets it really cheap because the person at the estate sale did not know the real value of it. She takes it home and that night she starts to dream about a woman from the 18th century and her name is Maria. And she has this very, very vivid dream about her, and she doesn't understand why she's having that dream. And then every night forward, she continues to dream about Maria. And it begins to drive her crazy because she's like, why am I dreaming about this woman? And so she meets this handsome history professor who agrees to help her trace the items in the box and find out who Maria is. And he traces it back to a shipwreck that took place off the coast of Cape Cod. And Maria was the fiancée of Black Sam Bellamy, and she's a real person, not just a character, but she lived in that time period. She was the fiancée of the wealthiest pirate in U.S. history. So from then on, once she starts to have that dream, there's a dual point of view between Madeline and Maria. And it's about Madeline's life owning an antique shop and being in her store and meeting this history professor who she begins to have a relationship. And then Maria, what her life was like back in that time period. So the two are sort of woven together in the book.
Is any of the information that you have in this book from your original research when you first decided to write a book?
Yes, a little bit back from that time period because I understood how women dressed in that age and all those other things that you need to do with research, like the lifestyle. Like for Maria, it's all about the details, the research details of how she dresses, what her life is like, how she lives in her home, what that is like. You really have to put yourself back in that time period and figure all those details out. And that takes a lot of work. But I still had to do more on this one because I was also researching Black Sam Bellamy and what his life was like and what their life was together. And there's a ton of information on him as a real person. There's very little information on her, except that she had the relationship with, and there's tons of stories on the coast of Cape Cod where these stories have lasted for years and years and years. So I read some of the local legends and I began to pull out some of the similarities that were in all the stories. And that helped me really put together the picture of her life and what it was like in that time period.
Now, a lot of writers tend to kind of project some of themselves into their books as well, especially their first book.
Yep.
Is there anything from you and your life in this?
Definitely. I think Madeline resonates with me a lot. And the irony about this was I really thought I was going to have a hard time writing the chapters on Maria because even her language was different. And I wanted to put at least a little bit of that in there just to show that time period. And I thought that was going to be my biggest challenge. And after I had done all that research, I sort of put that away and I did the first 10 chapters, the Madeline chapters. And then I brought out the Maria chapters and started to write that, and they flowed like it was nothing. They were so easy, while the Madeline chapters were so hard. And finally, it occurred to me, oh, well, Madeline's more like me. That's why I'm struggling with that a little bit. It's easier for me to relate to Maria because she's not like me and I can create her as a separate entity. But because I think Madeline resonated with me so much, I had a hard time separating myself from her and developing her as her own person.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny how things go because you think something's going to be really difficult and it's really easy. And then you think something else is going to be easy and it's really hard.
Yeah, it's always surprising how that works.
Exactly.
So what is it that is so similar between you and your character?
Well, Madeline has psychic abilities and she has a lot of empathy. I have that. I have a little bit of psychic abilities, but it's more empathic. So those things I could relate to, feeling different or separated from other people as a kid. I definitely could relate to those parts of her story. And so some of her struggles and her need to be independent, I definitely understood as well. So that was part of what made me relate to her. She was 35 years old. She wasn't married yet. So that was me at that age as well. So we had those things in common.
Now, do you have a love for antiques?
I do actually, it's in my family.
Really?
My grandparents had an antique store. I grew up in New Jersey. I moved to Florida in 1992. So pretty much as a kid, I remember going to my grandparents' house. They lived above the antique shop, and it was in an old building that was built in the 18th century, and it was actually a trading post at that time period.
Oh, wow.
And it was a beautiful stone building. So that's what was really neat about it for me as a kid. I loved to walk through the store and pick up pieces. And I loved to imagine who owned the items. What were they like? What were their lives like? It gave me a real sense of history and time, you know. And as a kid, you don't really understand life and death, but that gave me a real understanding of it. But I loved it. My grandmother's side, her brothers and sisters, several of them owned antique shops in that same area. So I just grew up with antiques. And my grandmother could look at an item and she could tell you the age, the value, all the details about it. She really knew her antiques. So it was a real part of my life. And when she passed away, my mom took over the shop and managed the business. So it continued to this day as part of who I am. And so that was really cool about it. I definitely understood that part of the book.
I love that. That would be so incredible growing up with that around you.
I know.
I love antiques.
I do too. But the sad part is they're selling the building now
Oh,
because my mom is too old to manage it and the kids don't really want to take it over. So we're in the process now. We're going up this week to help her move as they're preparing the building for sale. So that's heartbreaking for all of us.
yeah.
But that's also what makes me feel good about this series. I have this antique shop in there. And when my family read it, they were so thrilled about that. It's almost like I feel like I'm memorializing that part of my family.
Yeah, you're keeping it alive, even if it is in a book.
Exactly. Yes.
Sea Magic is the first book, but is this going to be a series?
Yes. It's the Hidden Gem series. And with sea magic, Madeline basically gets her sea legs, you know, quite literally.
Yeah.
She learns to embrace her psychic abilities and embrace her authentic self and who she is. So the book starts out with her struggle and it goes through that process of her trying to figure out this side of her that she tried to ignore all these years. So once she does that, in each additional book in the series, it'll be based on a paranormal mystery that is something that comes into her store. And that is the beginning of that mystery. She'll get a feeling about the item, and then things will begin to happen. And it'll be some type of paranormal event that she'll have to solve and or help out with the community or help out with another person who's connected to that item. It's kind of like Ghost Whisperer, I would say.
Ghost Whisperer. I was just thinking, that sounds like that TV show with Jennifer Love Hewitt. I loved that show.
That's what it is. But the funny part about that was, I think I finished my first draft and I was telling a friend about it. And my friend was like, that's Ghost Whisperer. And I had never watched the show.
Oh, wow.
So when I started watching it, I'm like, oh my God, that's it.
But I mean, your characters in the setting, it's nothing like her. It just happens to be an antique shop and somebody with psychic abilities. That's pretty much the basic connection.
Yes, the basic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it was exciting to see that because that show was successful. So it kind of gave me, oh, wow, yeah, this is great. I can do something like this.
I started reading Sea Magic. Oh my God, I am so hooked. You have got a fantastic descriptive style. It's so easy to fall into this story, and I think readers are absolutely going to love it.
That's great. I love the reviews I've gotten so far. It's just it was fantastic, and I can't tell you how terrified I was when I launched that book. I sweated it for weeks, and I knew that not everybody loves what you write. You're going to get good reviews and you're going to get bad reviews, and I knew that was a part of who I was, and I was okay to accept that as an author. That's part of the risk of being one. But the good reviews have outweighed everything, and the feedback has just been great. And it really validated, I think, who I am as an author. And it made me feel like, oh, I can go ahead and take risks and do these things. I can do this, And so that was really a wonderful experience for me on the first book, because I know that I'm still learning and that it'll get better. My writing will get better and better with each book. And I'm still at the beginning stages.
Well, I definitely think that people are going to love this.
Yay.
And now would be the perfect time to do our 5 quick question segment that never turns out to be quick. And we've kind of given up hope on that ever happening, but we still do it. Are you ready?
Yes.
So question 1, I know that you have a dog named Pumpkin and you have another dog. Can you tell us what are their breeds and how did you come about these names?
Well, both of them are foster dogs. We fostered both of them, which are now foster failures, which is kind of funny. But before we got Pumpkin, we had 2 toy fox terriers, and they passed away one after the other over the course of a year. And so we took a few months off, and we were debating if we were ready to get another dog. So I said to my husband, let's foster a dog as a transitional pet. We won't have to keep the pet, but it'll tell us whether or not we're ready and we're through the process of our grief and we're ready to have another dog. So he thought that was a great idea. We signed up for this amazing dog place that fosters dogs in our area. It's called the Pet and Poodle Rescue, and they do a fantastic job in our community. So we went to them and they showed us the pictures of the dogs they had available. We saw Pumpkin right away and we thought, okay, this is a good transition dog. We literally brought him home the night before a hurricane was about to hit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, talk about like a test. And when we called the foster place and said that we had chosen them, that was about, I called them at 3. At 5 o'clock, they said, can you come out and get him? They're going to close down the vet and we don't want to leave him there overnight in a hurricane. So we ran down and got him. We brought him into the house. And I think by the end of that hurricane, and I think it took us maybe about 2 weeks to say, we love this dog. We're keeping him. And he's a combination Pomeranian. He is a terrier and Chihuahua mix.
Oh, wow.
He's about 15 pounds. So he's got a couple different breeds in there, but he's the sweetest, calmest, kindest dog I have ever met. And he is definitely empathic. He can read people like nobody. And he's a very healing dog. I think he actually would make a great service dog. And then after that, we were still missing our little dogs. And so I was getting emails from the shelter, and it was great because this picture popped up of Lizzie, who looked like our toy fox terrier. She was actually a rat terrier and a Chihuahua mix, but she looked very similar, and she was a puppy. And I thought, well, this is great. We'll foster her and see what happens. And we brought her home, and she was just, at that time, she was 10 months old. So she was just this huge bundle of energy. And even our toy fox terriers we got when they were adults. So we were like, oh my God, it's so different when you have a puppy compared to an adult dog. It's a whole different world. And so we had to spend a lot of time training her. But we only had her for a week, and we came home from church and she flew off the top of the couch and broke her leg in 2 different places.
Oh, no.
Yes, yes. And she was screaming. We ran down to the vet. We were holding her, and her leg was in a funny angle. It was horrible. And so for the next 8 weeks, we had to keep her in a crate and just take her out to go to the bathroom and keep her very much confined. And she was a high energy puppy.
Oh, wow.
But the good part of that was we were able to train her because she was really spastic when we first got her. She was all over the place. And so that training really helped her, and it helped us as her foster parents. And then she had to get spayed. So we had her for about 3 months. And they said, okay, it's time for her to be adopted out. And we just couldn't fill out the application to give to them for them to start the adoption process. We just couldn't do it. And I looked at my husband and I said, I know this has been a dramatic experience as foster parents, but I don't think we want to let her go. That's why we can't send this in. And that was a reality check. So we have this little spastic, wild, fun dog and this very calm, loving dog. And I think the two balance each other out.
Yeah.
But they bonded in this whole process. Every time she would cry with her leg, or if she got into any kind of pain, Pumpkin would run over and check on her. And now they're so bonded. They sleep together on the couch. They'll sleep together in my office. They've really became like a bonded pair.
Oh,
So it's really amazing.
that's great. I love dogs.
You know. The funny part was that she wore this pink cast on her whole leg and she hated being in the crate. So she would whack it against the side of the crate to get her attention.
That's really smart, though.
She's a smart dog. She really is.
Oh, that's too good. Now, question 2. How much of a culture shock was it for you growing up in Jersey and then moving to Florida?
Huge. It was huge. And it was back in the 90s, and even Orlando wasn't what it is today. It was the culture here has become, I think, a little more cosmopolitan than it was then. So it was night and day. I moved down here in October. And so the wild part about it was I didn't know the heat yet, the summer heat. I wasn't exposed to that. But by December, I kept saying, because it was like the 60s, 70s during the day, it was beautiful.
Ooh.
And I kept saying, it's such a happy place. This is such a happy place because it was sunny all the time. It was green. There was no like wintry weather where it's gray and dark and the trees are bare. It was the opposite. So my friends would call me and say, what's Florida like? And I would go, it's happy here. It's so happy.
Yeah.
But then by the summertime, between May and August, I didn't go out except to go in my car or to go to work or to go in the house. It was like I was constantly in air conditioning because the summer heat, when you're not used to it, it's a whole different experience. And so I basically hibernated. But now I'm used to it and I really like it. But there was a big, big culture difference. The other difference between the South and the North is it moves a little bit slower. The pace is a little more relaxed. In New Jersey, it was a little more frantic with people, even driving on the highway. And then you have more of a Southern hospitality here where people will just, you'll be at the gas station and someone will have a conversation with you. And we didn't do that in New Jersey, And when I was at the supermarket and the guy came over, one of the helpers came over and offered to help me with my cart, I thought it was a scam.
Yeah.
And like, no, I'm not giving you a tip, I'm thinking. And I took my card. And that's just how it is here.
Yeah.
Everybody's friendly. They're more relaxed. You have that sort of that Southern mentality.
Now, what did you think when you heard your first falling lizard warning?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was lizards were like wild. All of a sudden, there's this little creature like running across the deck by the pool area or something, and you're not expecting that. And so there's a lot of creatures here I wasn't used to too. But that was probably the most like, what is that kind of reaction?
Well, I know a lot of people have never heard about this, but for those people who don't know, when temperatures drop to a certain point, lizards will go into hibernation.
Yes.
And if they're in trees, they will drop out of the trees.
Yes.
So there are falling lizard warnings when the temperatures drop too low in Florida.
Yes, there is. And it is a surprise to see that. And they're not like dead. It's just a thing that happens, and that's the funny part about it too. Yeah. My niece lives in Miami. She goes to the University of Miami. That is even more extreme there, she said, because they have the larger lizards too. And they see that on campus and they're just like, oh my God, it's a whole different world.
Definitely. Question 3. I know that you love coffee, chocolate, yoga, and visiting historical places, but if you had to give up one, which one would be the most difficult for you to give up?
Oh, that is so hard because I'm like addicted to coffee, especially in the morning, and chocolate is like my fix especially when I'm stressed. Yoga kind of helps me to, move and stay relaxed. And because, when you're sitting all day as a writer, yoga is so key. And then I love history. But if I had to give up one, I would give up chocolate because it's puts on the most weight and it's probably the unhealthiest out of all of those.
I can understand that. Now, question 4. Since you do have some supernatural elements in your story, have you ever had a supernatural experience?
Yeah, I have. I love to tour and visit old historical homes, especially in the places that we travel that have a lot of history. I like to go tour places like that. And a couple of years ago, my husband and I were in New Orleans and we were walking around the main downtown area and we stumbled upon this home, this historical house that was giving history tours. The guy was standing out selling the tickets. And so we signed up to go inside. And then I noticed on the sign in the far corner, there was a little ghost tour logo. And he told us that at night they do ghost tours in that house. So we kind of clued in that we might have some supernatural occurrences in there, but we thought it's during the day, it's a history lesson. And so we walked inside and there was actually one of those ghost hunters group came in. They had all the recording equipment and stuff, and they kind of followed us in and they were looking at the place. And he took us through one room where he stopped to talk about the history of the place that dates back to the Civil War. And it was very calm, nothing was happening. And I thought, this is nice. We'll get a good history lesson. And I had this like feeling came over me and this voice and I just heard it in my head, but it was like, get out, get out. And I thought, where is this coming from? And nobody else was reacting. And I'm like, this is too weird. So we came into the main room and I looked kind of up in the stairway. And this is part of my empathic ability to feel things in a room, but I felt this like evil energy like up towards this where the stairs was. And it was so overpowering that I grabbed my husband and said, we've got to get out of here now. And he looked at me like, what? We're in the middle of a tour. And I just said to the tour guide, we're late for an appointment. We forgot about it. And we ran out that door. And then we did some research on the way home. I looked up that house and it actually is the most haunted house in New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
And there was some terrible things that happened upstairs. There was a suicide. The woman of the house hung herself. There was an issue over a slave that was abused. And there was all these negative things that happened there. And that was really my biggest, I think, run-in with the supernatural.
Wow, that's incredible.
It was a wild experience. My husband, he kind of knew me, so he kind of went with it. And then when we looked it up, we both were it validated at least my experience.
Wow, that would be terrifying.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, question 5. We've been doing a lot of summer read suggestions lately. So if there was another author that you have really loved, who would you suggest other people read?
Well, I really love Paula Braxton, her Found Things series, The Little Shop of Found Things. It was very similar to Sea Magic, and I didn't find her until I was looking for comp authors for my book. But those books were very similar, and then I started reading her, and that was one of those you couldn't put a book down books, and it was very similar to my book. And then I read more of her stuff, and I really loved it. So for readers who like paranormal fiction or magical realism, I think she's a great author. And of course, I love Alice Hoffman and those other authors that write in that vein, but I really like her books.
So now, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody again who you are and where they can find more information on you and your first book, Sea Magic?
Okay. My author website is just HeidiMcIntyre.com. My last name is McIntyre, so it's spelled a little bit different. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, Heidi McIntyre author. Instagram, I think it's author44. And on Facebook, it's Heidi McIntyre author as well. And I'm on Goodreads too.
And all of your information is going to be in the description of today's podcast and on our website. So it'll be very easy for people to just click and go and find all of your information.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much for doing this today. This has been absolutely fantastic. And I am going to go read the rest of your book now.
Well, thank you. I have really enjoyed this. This was great.
So there you have it, folks. My interview with the incredible Heidi McIntyre. And I have to tell you, I did finish her book not long after this interview. And it was such a quick read. I loved it so much. It's really the kind of book that I just love to pick up on the weekend when I want to chill and just fall into a good book. And this was perfect for that. Be sure to check out all of her social media to find out more about Heidi and her book series, the Hidden Gem series, with more books to come. Don't forget, you can also check her out in the current issue of Book Banter magazine, along with all of the other authors who are going to be on our podcast through August and September. We've got so many great things coming up, and as long as my computer keeps working with me, I will be sure to get it all out to you on time. I think that's going to be all for today, folks. I still have to get my weekly video done and a few other things before I can put this up for broadcast, so I'm going to buckle down and get to it. But if you're hearing it, you know it all worked out. So it's time for you all to go forth and be really happy about all of that.